Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be giving you a basic tutorial on the Airship Industries Skyship 600. Now this aircraft has been giving a lot of people a lot of trouble. I don't blame them because it's got a lot of really interesting bugs. One of the most common bugs, of course, is when it spawns into the world, it tends to crash. The easiest way to solve this, by the way, is once you get into the world, press escape, hit restart. That's going to be the quickest and easiest way to solve that problem. So this is an airship. It's a lighter than aircraft. It's a little interesting of an experience. I always tell people if you think about it like a giant boat or submarine, you're probably going to have a much easier time navigating it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure the aircraft itself has the right weight. So if I go to my EFB real quick, go to my fuel, you'll see I have 100% fuel on board. If I were to empty my fuel, one of the things you'll observe is that it decides to sort of float away. Now, the reason this is an interesting problem for us is many people will instinctively think that I want my airship to be in this condition. We don't want that because we can't let helium out. Because we can't let helium out, that means once we disconnect, we're just going to float away and can't get back down. Creates an interesting problem, to say the least. So I'm going to load it up with fuel. That's plenty of fuel to get us going for a while. Now, the next thing you're going to have to start worrying about is the controls. So one of the things I'll do here is I'll go ahead and open up my controls real fast to show you what I've done. Gunfighter Modern, this is my stick, and I'm going to go down to Assigned. What you'll observe is if you come down to rudder, ailerons, and elevator, is the fact that my ailerons and rudder axis are the same axis. Normally I use my foot pedals for this. If you use your foot pedals, you will discover that when you move the yoke back and forth with your ailerons, nothing happens. Your rudders control left and right. So your aileron, the actual yoke, will move back and forth. I don't know, I find that kind of uncomfortable, so I just changed it. The other thing you're going to see down here is left pilot thrust vector decrease. The engines on this thing have the ability to rotate in place, which is a really, really fun trick. The entire thing can point up or they can point down, and it makes it much, much easier to control. Now, the reason I bring this up, of course, is because when you're setting this thing up, if you don't have a button for this, you have no other way to really trim or control the nose. You can see I can sit here and actually hit the button. It's moving. I don't know how that's possible. See, there's no electricity to it, but that's the button there, and I just bind it. It's much easier. So that being said, let's get this thing started. First things first, I'm going to take my throttles. I'll stick them up to the start position. Looks good to me. Float above my head here. We have some easy switches. We're going to turn on our navigation lights. Come down here. I'm going to leave these alone for now. We're going to come to our start, lift up this little bar, hit our switches. Once those are set, we're simply going to select the engine we want to start, starboard first, and we're going to go ahead and hit ignition, fuel pump. You're going to grab this guy, pull it to the right. That's it. You see that engine started up. Let's go ahead and do the other one. That's it. Engines are started. So I'm going to go ahead and isolate this. Looks good to me. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit the GS bus, press these two buttons, and I'm going to go ahead and reduce my throttle. So what we're looking here is an idle of about 2,000 RPM. So I'm just going to gently hit it. And yes, this gauge is completely broken. There's nothing you can do about it. Relax. Nothing bad will happen. And this, of course, would normally be the warm-up procedure. Now, one of the things we want to talk about while we're sitting here on the ground, kind of warming everything up, is the way that lift is controlled. Now, we have two different controls of lift. First of all, the whole airship itself acts like a giant wing, which means if the nose is pitched up, we go up. If it's pitched down, we go down, submarine style. The second thing is we have the ability to basically control the amount of density of our helium by adjusting something called a ballonet. Now, there's two parts to this. The first one is going to be above your head. You have these things called dampers. These are basically going to let air into the bag, the balloons within the balloon. Now, if we shove more air into our balloon and not the helium balloon, it causes the helium's density to increase, which in effect makes us have less lift. Now, to make things complicated, you'll notice that we have three different gauges for that. We have one bag in the front, ballonet in the front, one in the middle, and one in the aft. That's the aft one. And you'll notice right now there's no air in any of these bags. If we want to be able to trim, we have to actually provide air into this system. Of course, the way it is right now, we're just going to go up at whatever the center of gravity our entire airship happens to be. So if we want to do that, there's two different things we need. First of all, we need the dampers, which are going to be letting air into the system. The checklist basically says, set it like that and forget it, kind of a thing like that. If it bothers you, of course, you can always set one into the auto position, leave one unlocked, and that's going to give you just the right amount of air. The next thing we have to do is we have to actually turn on the ballonets. Now, as it stands, because of the current air pressure and combinations of controls, we're looking pretty good. Now, if I wanted to actually pressurize these for the purposes of testing the trim, I could actually come up here and turn them on manual. Now, what you'll see here is all of these gauges went on. The way this works is the higher this number, the less lift you will produce on that part of the airship. For example, you'll notice my front one here is all equal. We're basically perfectly balanced. Now, if I were to come over to these air valves, you'll notice that by adjusting them, I can adjust how much pressure is in them. So for example, if I were to grab the front one and give it a tug, you will see that the pressure, if I pull it like that, comes down in the front, which makes the nose essentially trim up. You'll notice if I grab the one in the back and pull it, that we basically knock the air out of the bag in the back. Now, the one you're going to probably adjust the most is going to be this guy right here. By tugging this one, you'll see that we have a little bit of a better balance. And of course, if you grab this one right here, you'll notice that we get a little less in the front. Now, normally what we would have to do is we'd have to sit here and trim that very, very, very precisely. Right now, as a matter of fact, you can see that we're perfect. Basically perfect. We did a nice job. Yeah, we're a little nose heavy. So what we could do, of course, is we could try to put a little bit less pressure on the nose. But you've got to remember, we're also connected to a mast here. So when we come loose, we might not actually have that problem. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave everybody in neutral for now. One of the cool things, of course, is I'm going to leave them on manual for takeoff. I'm going to make sure my dampers are set. Again, I can do this for takeoff without any consequence. Please do not do that. You will overpressurize and bad things will happen. So we'll leave it just like that. Speaking of overpressurization, if you look down here, you can actually see the total pressure of all of our ballonets. Right now it's in the green, which is good. If I were to close off my dampers, there'd be no way to get air into the system, so in which case it would basically get stuck. Now, if I open both these, of course, you're not going to see this here because we're not moving right now. This needle would slowly come into the red, and like I said, pressure release valves would kick in and stuff. Bad news for us. Like I said, you can basically leave that for takeoff. Speaking of takeoff, let's go. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to float down. I'm going to vector up to 45 degrees. That's not 45. That's 45. Close enough. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these on manual so it doesn't go pitching all over the place on me. I want a little bit of control. And then what we're going to do is we're going to request release. To do that, open up air traffic control, go down to ground services like that. Go ahead and make your way to mass disconnect. Get ready on the power. Go. And we're on our way. Now, one of the things I noticed right away is we are a bit nose heavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set my vector thrust pretty steep here. I want to get a little bit of altitude before we start trimming this. Give it just a little more. There we go. And again, because of the center of gravity of our airship, our vector isn't going right through us evenly here. About 45 degrees. There we go. It's coming up. Nice. Very good. There we go. We need a little bit of speed here. Start moving towards 0 degrees. Oh, we are heavy. There we go. Nice. So now it operates like a submarine. So if I pull back, the nose comes up, we go up. If I push forward, the nose goes down, we go down. So what I like to do now is I like to get a little bit of altitude. And again, once you start fiddling with things like trim, you're really, really going to want to have a little bit of altitude before you start doing this. Go ahead and hit that to 0. My vector's at 0. Looks good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get myself to about 50 miles per hour, 50 knots here. Because we do have a red line speed, believe it or not. Should be good. I think it's about 15 inches usually. Nice. Got it. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to trim out the bag. Right now we have a downward tendency. It just means we're just a little heavy. One of the things we could do is, of course, we could use a little bit of our water ballast if we wanted. And I'm noticing that I'm having to pull back pretty hard to kind of keep that nose up right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to our little air valves and I'm going to fiddle with them a little bit to try to get it a little more balanced. Actually, to be honest, it feels pretty good. Yeah, it feels pretty good. Never mind. Oh, no. Nose is coming down. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a tug. Push it up. Just feel it. Just feel what it wants to do. See how fast that started to come back up? Looks good. We'll give it a blast to the back. Feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. We're pitching up quite a bit here. And we're groovy. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the ballonet fans on auto. And they will automatically adjust themselves based on what we need to do. And now we're ready to actually start operating the airship. Everything's feeling pretty good. I got a little nose up trim. My vectors are straight. My speed is really, really good right now. So now we can take a look at things like turns. I could use just a little bit more nose up here. That's it right there. Delightful. So when we turn this one, you have to remember using rudders and not ailerons. I overdid it. I was right the first time. So when we turn, you have to go ahead and tip just a little bit the direction you want to go, and then you have to bring your controls slightly back to center. There it goes. And you're going to notice that I'm not working the controls very hard here. It's a very, very gentle turn. And this is really all you need to get it going. Then as you make the turn, you will notice that the whole balloon will accelerate in its turn. So if I give it a little more power here. Again, 50 miles an hour. Nice. Now if I want to crank over on it, I'm going to crank the rudder very hard here, just as a demonstration. You'll notice the entire airship starts to tilt. And as you do this, you'll also notice that you bleed speed very quickly. So whatever nice, smooth aerodynamic lift you've achieved has basically been invalidated by your incredibly aggressive turn. Like I said, this thing's almost like a ship. One of the cool tricks we have, of course, is if you have a split throttle, we can do things like that, which would basically give us more power on one side. So if you have to do a very aggressive maneuver, we can actually kill the power on one side completely and just run one engine, basically, as well as cranking on it. This will get you turning very aggressively if it's something that you're trying to do. Very, very nice. Now that we're at a happy altitude here, I'll go ahead and reduce my power back to my kind of cruise here. Everything's looking pretty good. We're in trim. You can see the automatic mode just killed all of our pressure. Well, we got a little bit of pressure built in it. It's perfectly fine. And that's basically all there is to it to control. Now, I'm sure you're very curious how we get this thing back down. Oh, by the way, when you come out of a turn, you got to give it a little bit of right rudder in order to kind of recenter yourself. Now, let's say, of course, we want to land somewhere. First of all, you got to get yourself a better spot than this. Ah, that's a little better. So, of course, when you're doing these things, you got to remember it takes you about 3.5 miles to execute a 180-degree turn. So when you do decide when you're ready to land, you have to kind of plan everything about 5 minutes to 10 minutes in advance. Again, I used a little bit of magic there to kind of get us all lined up with the runway. So basically at this point, you want to make sure your entire airship is all nice and trimmed, that you're not fiddling with the different trim settings or anything like that. You want it just the way that you want. The other thing you want to keep in mind that as you start to come in, wind is a very, very real problem with this thing. And if there's any wind at all and you have any crosswind, you've really got to bring yourself around and basically align with it. One of the cool things is if you do have a strong wind, you can take advantage of that by going into that wind and actually using it to help slow you down. If you try a crosswind landing, you are asking for it. Now, the real trick here, of course, is, again, if we want to use that building to my right, for example, to come from my landing, and no, I'm not moving in slow motion, believe it or not, is what we have to do is use our vector thrust to help bring us down. So what I like to do now is I like to go ahead and flip on the ballonet fins, and I want them to stay on. I'm also going to check to make sure my dampers are set correctly. I'll bring this one to the middle position just in case. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use our thrusters to basically slow ourselves down. So I'm going to come down here, pull it to idle. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to nose it all the way down and then backwards, just like that. You can see that's 120 degrees. Now, when I start to apply power, this is going to be really goofy because you're basically pulling yourself down. So you want to do it very gently. Just give it a little tap of power, and the whole thing will start gliding down very gently on its own. Good time to check your trim. You can see I'm a little nose up. Good. That should help balance that out. Oh, perfect. That's exactly what I want. And maybe a little quick blast to nose up, too. Delightful. So we got about 500 feet per minute. We're coming in quite nicely. Adjust my vector a little bit here. Give myself just a little bit of right. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to catch yourself. So I'm going to give myself a little vector up. Very nice. Very good. Looks good to me. Let's kind of make our way again. I'm actually vector up right now. Everything's in very good trim. Just kind of leveling off over this tree line here. And all we're doing here is trying to pick a place on the ground we want to basically set ourselves. And you'll see that quick little blast of power is all it takes to kind of catch yourself. Looking good, looking good. Now, this is one of those times when you're going to want to have ballast handy. All right, let's start slowing down. There we go. Very nice. Got to pull the nose up a little bit. And all we're trying to do is bleed some speed here. Oops, gonna hit a little hard. Nice. And we're down. Just like that. Enjoy.